Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Scouting the Fins. The Miami Dolphins have selected one player in day two of the 2025 NFL Draft on a draft day trade up, which we did not expect the Miami Dolphins to do. Before we get into it, I want to talk about our sponsor for this show, Thompson Cigar. Go to thompsoncigar.com. And when you purchase $75 or more, you get 20% off of your order using the promo code 3yards20. Once again, go to thompsoncigar.com. And if you order $75 or more, you can get 20% off your order if you use the code 3yards20. Gentlemen, Coach, and Eric, when we went on our live stream, we were actually discussing our pregame plan, and then all of a sudden, the Dolphins traded up, and we had to start the live stream. Like, oh my God, okay, what did they actually do here? And I know what my initial reaction was. You guys saw it, but what was your guys' initial reactions?
Surprised. I mean, we talk about this team needing to fill several holes, so didn't expect them to trade up and have less picks. It ended up being both the shortest night and the longest night that we've had for the draft. Because I mean, not used to just getting on and getting our pick out of the way, and it's just kind of sitting around. Spent the rest of the night kind of expecting them to try to get back up into maybe the third round again, and that didn't happen either. So we'll be interesting to see how tomorrow goes with it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I find myself really happy about the player in Savaiinaea, but it just, man, I can't see a justification for subtracting draft capital for this team in general. And I think Savaiinaea answers a lot of problems along the offensive line. But I also look at it and I'm like, okay, well, for a team that's not very close to contention, I don't know how much I love subtracting from your overall asset pool in general, especially if they didn't have a subsequent move lined up to get back into day two, which in hindsight we see now that they didn't. But I'm excited to talk about Jonah Savaiinaea. We spoke about it at length during the live stream. I think we're all pretty happy with that pick overall and what he could mean for the Dolphins offensive line in 2025.
Yeah, I was shocked that they traded up for an offensive lineman, albeit a very, very good offensive lineman. But what they had to give up, they obviously had to move up to pick number 37. They had to give up pick number 48. They had to give up their third round pick, number 98, as well to the Las Vegas Raiders. They had to give up one of their fifth round picks, pick number 135. The Dolphins still have three fifth round picks. Instead of having 135, 150, and 155, they have 143, 150, and 155. They gained that 143rd pick in the fifth round. They have a fourth rounder pick, 114, I believe, for 116 for the fourth round. Coach, you brought up a really, really great point based on the Rich Hill trade model that numerically and point-wise, the Miami Dolphins actually won this trade by a very slim margin of points. I mean, a win is a win. The pick of 48, 98, and 135 consists of 566.5 points. The picks of 37 and 143, because of the weight of earlier draft picks carries more, 37 and 143, 564.5 points. So the Dolphins essentially won that draft, regained some better draft capital in terms of that trade. And Eric, I know you said it that Chris Greer does not lose trades at all.
Yeah, and for the sake of clarification, that the numbers there were actually not the Rich Hill model. That was, and that's what I said before. I was incorrect. It was from the drafttech.com model, which is pretty similar. I mean, it's all the same idea. I think that Kyle Krabs had shared what the actual Rich Hill model was, but either way, like the trade was within.
It was the exact same, actually.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was the exact same.
same difference there. So on the surface, when you see all of those picks, and it doesn't feel like you're moving up that far, right? You're only moving up 11 picks. Just shows how valuable those picks are, right? When you're trying to get into the top 40. Um, but like you said, Chris Greer does not lose trades. So when you look at the value chart of multiple different ones, and nobody knows exactly which one NFL GMs are using. But when you can, when you're coming out on top on multiple models, usually means you did a pretty good job.
Certainly, I think when from like an overall value perspective, you can make an argument that this was a good trade, and I wouldn't even argue with that really. I guess where my concern is just the context of where the Dolphins are in just how far along are they in building this thing back up, because I think we can all kind of take a look, and it certainly looks like this was kind of a take a step back off season. But when you're making moves like trading up, it almost belies a belief that you are going to contend in 2025, rather than take that step back. So I feel like we've just been getting a little bit of mixed signals. But I also understand with a player like Savaiinaea, if the conviction's there, you make the move regardless.
Yeah, that move was unexpected from us. And in the media presser, Jonah Savaiinaea also said that he did not expect the Dolphins to trade up for him. He was kind of surprised. His agent actually told him, don't expect to wait too long, and he kept his phone by him. He said that they called me, and that conversation was just excitement all over. His family was cheering him on, and they weren't even clock at that point. So he was kind of confused. Then that they were trading up to select him. He said that meant a lot to him. Just trading up for him, it stood out for how they valued him overall. He said he's excited to get to work. So yeah, Jonah Savaiinaea seemed really, really excited, and Coach and Eric, we were very excited about this pick. Just talking about what he brings to this Dolphins team.
Yeah. Like you said, very excited about it. And you have to look at what was the opportunity cost, right? Like if we had sat at 48, obviously Dolphins felt that somebody else was looking at Savaiinaea for them to come up and get him at 37. You also saw Mason Taylor, who we talked about as a possible target. Alfred Collins went at 43. Will Johnson finally came off the board at 47. And then, had the Texans stayed there, they might have just gone with Ariante Ursary. So when you look back at that value, we talked about how well Chris Greer read the board in the first round with the Kenneth Grant pick before the run there. And I kind of get the feeling again, as we see how the board played out, that another good move by Greer to come up and get a player that, as I said during the live stream, like this was the last guy that I had that is put him in ink. He's the other guard no matter what. And there is certainly value there. Like we talked about, it'll be nice to go into a season as long as everybody along the offensive line stays healthy, and we know exactly who those 5 offensive linemen are. We're not going to be sitting here in weeks 1 and 2 of training camp, trying to get the inside information as to, who's playing right guard today and stuff like that. So very good player here. Like what he does, brings some different stuff to the offensive line that we haven't had in the past, and provide some stability. Overall, just a good pick.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I'm most kind of excited about when it comes to Savaiinaea is kind of what he alluded to, in saying that he was in his excitement and his excitement to work with the Miami Dolphins is this is a really, really athletic player. And I think there is issues in terms of polish, but I almost see that as a positive when it comes to Savaiinaea, almost in the way that we saw with Patrick Paul a little bit last year, where, here was a guy that in Paul who was really, really good in college, despite the fact that he wasn't all the way there technically yet. And I think that you kind of see some of the same things there with Savaiinaea. And it's just as he continues to get better from a technical standpoint, you kind of really understand that the sky is the limit for this guy, especially along the inside when you take the physical tools that he has. Once he does get those tweaks and the intricacies of the guard position kind of stamped down at the NFL level, I think this guy is going to be really, really good.
Yeah, Coach McDaniel said that they expect Jonah Savaiinaea to start at guard, and Savaiinaea says that he is better suited to play along the interior. He's comfortable at guard just because he's a big-bodied guy. He stated that, he's good with his hands, getting off his stance, that, he likes to punch guys right then and there, and it feels like home for him, just putting hands on guys right now. I think this is a culture setter of a pick. Kenneth Grant, a guy that can punch you in your mouth in different ways. Jonah Savaiinaea that can punch you in your mouth getting off the line. The Dolphins need that toughness, especially as they get to colder road games. And if they expect to make a playoff push, and if they even expect to make the playoffs, they need to be able to be physical, to be tough, to contend with the Buffalo Bills, to contend with the Baltimore Ravens, to contend with teams that can bully them along the trenches. They're trying to become the bullies now. It's very refreshing to see that they're going away from the finesse style to more so a tough, grind it out type of offense and even defense. Coach and Eric, we were speaking about how the type of guards that they have now in Savaiinaea and James Daniels, it allows them to be multiple, where they don't just have to rely on outside zone. They can also run some counters. They can run some power as well. Savaiinaea talked about the duos and traps as well. When I asked him about, what he can do to get better within his power outside of the zone runs that he talked about, being much more quicker on those duos, on those blocks. And we saw Miami be very successful last season on duos and counters.
Yeah, and Eric made a great point there about the comparison to Paul in terms of a player that is not fully developed. I mean, Savaiinaea, for the most part at Arizona, was essentially playing out of position. You could see at times that he kind of looked like a fish out of water, playing out at tackle in space, right? So moving him inside to guard where he'll be more comfortable, like you said, Hassam, and then really letting him focus in on those skills. You said about having the 2 new guards, right? Both 320-pound plus is something that we talked about that we wanted to see them do. We've talked about the short yardage woes that the Dolphins have had, and a lot of that came down to the guards not being able to get movement in short yardage. I think that's one of the things that Savaiinaea does best, is to get that movement in short yardage. And I don't, when you see the type of athlete that he is, they're not a lot of experience in an outside zone scheme with what Arizona did. So there's going to be a learning curve for him there. But, he's going to bring things from day one that you didn't have before. And when you get into those 3rd and 1 situations, right, now you have that big body that you can run directly behind. And like you said, right, you can just be a bully. Right. You don't have to finesse it. You don't have to run misdirections. You don't have to, run an end around to Tyreek or a crack toss throwing it to Janu Smith. Right. You've got the guys on the interior now that you can just line up and say, we're going to run it right at you and we're going to do it well.
Yeah, I think with Savaiinaea, one of the best things that you get is, you kind of get a guy that's good at the weaknesses of the offensive line, and as you mentioned, kind of a guy that can get you that movement in short yardage situations. But and we hit on this in terms of Hussam setting this up with talking about getting a little bit less of that finesse. But the thing that I think it's important to mention is they've still kind of done a really good job of melding those two worlds with Grant and Savaiinaea, because we talk about Mike McDaniel and the speed of guys, and we're usually talking about skill position players when we're doing that. But we're talking about a guy in Grant who's a sub 540 at 340. And we're talking about a guy in Savaiinaea who's, one of the quickest guards, or one of the quickest offensive linemen, period, in the class, best 10-yard split. You're not sacrificing that athleticism just to get a bunch of big maulers up front. And that's where I think there's a little bit of projection with Savaiinaea as far as the outside zone stuff goes. But he has the athleticism to really thrive in that once he does kind of, as mentioned, and it's going to be a theme with him, kind of really get the feel for the technique in that system.
Yep, Coach had a really good tidbit on the live stream, and our friend of the podcast, Travis Wingfield, also noted down that Jonah Savaiinaea's 10-yard split, Coach, you mentioned it was 1.72? 1.72, and you said that was the fastest any lineman has ever had who was taken by a Shanahan-style team. Wingfield followed it up by saying that is also the fastest of any offensive lineman that weighed 315 pounds or more. Jonah Savaiinaea is 6'4", 320 pounds. He carries his weight really, really well. His upper body is really well. And I talked about that there were some criticisms about him with his lower body, not necessarily his upper body, from draft analysts and media, that it's not quick enough for some particular inside runs, some gap runs as well. So I asked him, what is he doing to improve? And, he stated that he's just trying to tighten up his stance because he plays with a high pad level. He said that when he gets to Miami, that he's going to trust Coach Butch Berry. And we've said it all along, in Butch Berry we trust for Patrick Paul. He's done it with Austin Jackson. Aaron Brewer has done really, really well. Patrick Paul and Jonah Savaiinaea are next in line for Butch Berry's projects and those young pups growing to, adult offensive linemen 2 to 3 years from now. Savaiinaea says that, Coach Butch Berry is going to get him better, lean onto the rest of the guys on the offensive line. Obviously, James Daniels, Aaron Brewer, Austin Jackson as well. He said that he needs to give himself a little bit of space from the line of scrimmage and just work off of that, so that way he can be a bit quicker. I said that in Miami, we love running outside zone and duos. So I want to be able to show my quick first step and just stack bodies on top of bodies, on top of bodies, on top of bodies. Definitely a dog mentality. All right, before we head into a film deep dive, Coach is going to break it down and we'll get some answers as to what Savaiinaea can bring on the football field and what we can see in the passing game and the Dolphins' run game. Do you ever watch sports and find yourself wishing there's a way to get into the game? With Underdog, there's finally a way to make picks on sports without leaving the house. The game is in your hands. To play, choose whether a player will go higher or lower on one of their stats. It's NBA playoffs right now, so you can go higher or lower on your favorite players' points, assists, rebounds, and more. They've got all your favorite leagues, teams, and stars to choose from. You can play with as little as $1, and if you get everything right, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn $1 into 1,000 just with your sports knowledge. Download the Underdog app and sign up now using the promo code 3yards to unlock a special offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. Join in on the fun when you sign up with promo code 3yards. Claim your special offer today and get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly upon first deposit.
Be 18 plus, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 19 plus in Alabama, New England, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE NY or text Hope NY to 467-369.
All right, and we are back. Coach and Eric, the Miami Dolphins have selected Jonah Savaiinaea, their only pick of night 2 of the draft. I asked Savaiinaea, he played a lot of right tackle at Arizona. He also played left tackle. He also played right guard and left guard. He's got a career 900 snaps at right guard. And I think he will play at right guard right next to Austin Jackson, and Aaron Brewer could be his mentor. That's 2 veterans helping him out specifically with the outside zone run game and pass blocking. So I asked him, who does he idolize his play style after? And he name dropped a couple of guys that he's watched a lot of film on specifically for tackles and guards. So for outside tackles, he talked about, Trent Williams, Penei Sewell, and his former teammate, Jordan Morgan, out of the Panthers. He also watched a lot of Tristan Wirfs, so that way he can work on his lower body, because Wirfs' quickness and feet movement and how he carries his weight and handles his lower body is among the elite levels. As for guards, he watched a lot of Quentin Nelson, David DeCastro, just because he wants to mimic how they use their feet and footwork wise. And another guy who's actually a free agent right now, Brandon Scherf. Coach, what do you think about those guys that he idolizes his play style after?
I mean, that's a great list. I mean, you're not going to find a much better list of guards when you're talking about guys that you want to idolize. I mean, they're all guys that succeed in multiple ways. They're not just, your smaller, quicker guards, are also not just your bigger, slugs in the middle. They are guys that can win in space. They can win in close quarters. And, if you're looking for a list of guys to model your game after, there's nothing wrong with any of those guys.
Yeah, certainly. I think you look at that list, and that's kind of what you want to see, because as you mentioned, it shows that there's not an aspect of his game or of his game that he's, really neglecting. He's looking at guys that are all really well-rounded, and it's, not necessarily about, okay, well, I'm going into this scheme, so I need to be this really hyper-specific skill set. This is a player that's looking to be as well-rounded as possible. And I think, as you look for guys that are going to have that work ethic and contribute to that culture, that's what you want to see.
Yeah, that positional versatility of Jonah Savaiinaea is what Mike McDaniel and specifically Chris Greer looks for. He's played 4 out of the 5 positions, all except for center. In 2022, 790 snaps at right guard. In 2023, 693 snaps at right tackle, 195 snaps at right guard. In 2024, he played like 48% of his snaps at left tackle and 51% of his snaps at right tackle. He played both positions in 2024. Coach, you said that, this Arizona offense didn't particularly highlight Savaiinaea's skill set too well.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly have some highlight plays in there, but for the most part, the way that they were asking him to play in space, they really didn't have a tight end with him very often, and that's something that McDaniel's talked about a lot, being able to run to the strong side of outside zone, and I mean that's really more of a conversation for tackles. But you didn't get those guard type reps watching Arizona where you might with other teams, right? When we watch, let's say, Penn State and you're seeing Tyler Warren in line, it makes it a little easier to project what that tackle might look like if he slid inside. Whereas Savaiinaea is playing on the edge, rarely with a tight end. So he's really in space. This rep here, he's got a tight end beside him. It's a little easier to project when you have a tight end beside him what it would look like if you bump him inside, right? Whereas a rep like this is a little different. And these are both going away from him. So not great examples of what I'm trying to, detail right here. But when you're looking at trying to project a tackle inside to a guard, I try to look for reps where they have a tight end outside. So they are working in those closer quarters like they will be when you move them over one spot to the inside. And that's just the way that I felt that Arizona asked him to do a lot of stuff that he wasn't great at, and asked him to do it in a way that didn't showcase his ability to move to guard. So, even though his film was solid, right, doesn't have a ton of highlight plays, there's also not a lot of, awful plays either. So I think that once he moves into guard, that it will provide more opportunities. And this is a good example here, right? A down block. They're bringing the guard and a H or a F here on the counter. So Savaiinaea is blocking down here. You can see the movement that he's helping on that first level defender before he's climbing and sealing. And that's the type of stuff that you're going to be able to see him do a lot more as a guard than you will when he's playing tackle.
Yeah, one of the things that I find interesting here with Savaiinaea is, especially as a tackle, or on these reps as a tackle, and I you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think this will improve itself naturally as he lines up at guard. Is on the tackle reps, I'm kind of thinking to myself, I don't necessarily see that 1-7-2 10-yard split, that kind of explosion off the snap. But I think that's really just more of an issue with his stance and kind of standing up a little bit more upright. Is that something that as he moves inside the guard and as he gets into that, kind of lower stance in that guard position, that we'll see a little bit more of that kind of explosion translate on the field?
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the way that you have to play when you're on the edge.
Right.
When you're playing like this, right? This is it's still inside zone, but when he's trying to get out to this defender, you can't overrun that, right? Whereas if he was playing in here as the guard and we had a tight end outside of there, right, he could really run off the ball and sell out to knock that defender over, right? Let's say As we're looking at this, let's say the defense was shifted over, so this tackle was down the A gap, and that Savaiinaea was here as the right guard, and they were comboing out through this end up to this linebacker, right? Off the ball, the tackle's got to be a little more aware of his surroundings in terms of being able to either get beat to the outside or the inside. But, if you have a guard that has a uncovered B gap here, he can really run off the ball, explode through the hip of that defender, and then climb to the next level. So I think you definitely have a point there that, the way that Arizona had him playing tackle didn't necessarily allow him to basically play with reckless abandon in a sense, right? When you move to guard, everything's closer quarter, so there's more or less margin for error, right? So you can be more aggressive with your technique when you don't have to worry, about somebody beating you around the edge and things like that.
Yeah, I think we're seeing some reps in the passing game as well. We see him trying to hold his own up against Big 12 defenders, but he's going to be going up against, the likes of potentially Von Miller, the Buffalo Bills revamped defensive line. If the Miami Dolphins have to play Baltimore up in Baltimore, that Ravens defense is scary. The Jets defensive line is retooled and reloaded. The New England Patriots defense, it's kind of underrated. Like the Dolphins needed him to basically fix the trenches and make sure the pocket is clean for Tua. To his former coach at Alabama and the former Dolphins coach, Nick Saban, said that in order for, the Dolphins to win, Tua has to stay healthy and he needs to be upright. And the Dolphins have a very good chance of winning almost every single game if Tua is kept clean. Now, Jonah Savaiinaea has that anchor specifically at the guard position because he's able to use some of that quickness to get off the line of scrimmage faster than he would be playing tackle, because you have to widen your stance as a tackle, as you see in that play. And coach, correct me if I'm wrong, he doesn't have to worry about that. He can just work within his own space, feel his own space, get that natural feel for him around him. And if he does need to go out on those duos, on those combos, if he needs to climb up into that second level, he can feel comfortable. Routinely we saw a lot of plays of Liam Eichenberg and the other Dolphins guards, tripping up, trying to get to the second level or not getting there in time. Jonah Savaiinaea is able to get there in time into space.
Yeah, you're exactly right with the ability to work in the closer quarter. You see it in his pass sets. I don't have any great examples of him losing on the counter moves, but that's something that you do see with him in space. This is a 9 technique defensive end that he's got to kick out here and try to get to. And when everything goes to plan, it's pretty solid, right? But if a defender counters in space, he doesn't do a great job of being able to redirect and adjust to that. And when you move him into guard, you basically eliminate that. I mean, you have to worry about some, but not anything like this. You're always going to have, bumpers to your inside and your outside. One thing I really like that Savaiinaea does in pass protection, and we see it on a few of these reps, and he'll be able to really utilize this on the inside, is that he doesn't give the edge player a chance to develop his move, right? A lot of offensive tackles, especially young ones, right? They'll be so worried about their feet and staying in position that this edge player is rushing untouched and just setting up his move. And the next thing you know, he is, swiping hands away or spinning. Whereas you see how, in this rep, right, this defender is still setting up his move and Savaiinaea is getting his hand into him. Just see how that little bit adjusts him. And a lot of times that's all you got to do with an edge rusher is just to disrupt his plan. And, same thing there, right? That defender coming off the edge, he's looking to run around the edge. And we'll see a lot of young tackles, right, just try to follow this, try to flip the hips and run, but that big right paw from Savaiinaea getting into the center of him is going to slow him down. And that's stuff that when you get to the inside and, he doesn't have to worry about the left and right as much, right? This, the ability of him to be aggressive in his pass sets and to get his hands into those defenders, I think is really going to benefit him in there.
Yeah, I think this also becomes a potential insurance policy if Austin Jackson does go down. In the media presser, Savaiinaea talks about the Polynesian culture, and he speaks about how all of the quarterbacks he's protected have come from the Polynesian culture. He said himself, and I'm quoting it, maybe God wants me to go today. So when today I heard my name got called, I was just so glad to be a Dolphin, man, because he was so excited when he got the phone call. It had the 305, the Miami area zip code. He's like, oh my God, I'm going to play with Tua. Like, this was a sign. And he was so excited. He's like, I don't know about the draft picks before me. That's out of my control. And it's what I care about is a team that drafted me. So I'm so excited. He mentioned meeting Tua at the 2022 Polynesian Bowl. They also played at the same high school as well. So this leads me to believe, maybe, like there's a lot of connections there. There's a lot of connections with this Jonah Savaiinaea pick. I talked about on Twitter that, same school as Tua. The offensive line coach he had at Arizona for his first 2 years was Pete Carroll's son, who was the Arizona offensive line coach. Pete Carroll was hired by the Las Vegas Raiders in January. Champ Kelly was hired over to the Dolphins from the Las Vegas Raiders when he was let go in February, and he was one of the decision makers to bring in Pete Carroll. Champ Kelly, as we have speculated, could potentially be the next general manager in waiting for the Dolphins if Chris Grier is not the general manager in Miami. There are a lot of connections. I just feel like this is way too coincidental for this to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of on-field and off-field that Savaiinaea just kind of checks off, just about every box you could want for this Dolphins team, especially when you consider, number one, as mentioned, in terms of just the culture stuff and wanting to bring in the guys that are going to be brought in. We talk about Mike McDaniel talking about the Dolphins are going to be one team moving in one direction in 2025. Savaiinaea is very much a part of that. And then just from an on the field standpoint, in terms of what this team is looking to be in terms of more physical, more aggressive up front, we talk about Savaiinaea kind of being an offensive lineman. He's, as a younger guy, he's not necessarily shy about being the one to make that first move and kind of putting, striking first along the to the defensive lineman. And I think that's something that's going to be that's going to show itself more even at guard than it will at tackle, because at guard, he's not going to have to worry about widening out to try to, get out around the bend of the edge rusher. He's just going to be able to, okay, he's got really good length overall for a guard. So he's going to be able to get out, and that length is going to create problems because he's got that phenomenal upper body strength as it is. This is a guy that just checks all the boxes on the field, off the field. I don't see how you can have a problem with this player, this pick in a vacuum for the Dolphins.
Yeah, on the phone call that he was having with Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel, he told them, tell Tua to get ready. He said, tell Tua to get ready. So the Dolphins have their offensive linemen. Uh, it looks like it's going to be Patrick Paul, James Daniel, Aaron Brewer, Jonah Savaiinaea, Austin Jackson. And if all 5 of them are healthy for at least, 15, 16 games, uh, that continuity is going to be very, very good for all those guys involved. It's going to be good for the running game. It's going to be good for the offense, especially that continuity. Outside of that, the Dolphins will be picking 116th in the 4th round. They have 3 5th-round picks and I believe 3 more 7th-round picks as well. So they have 7 more picks to go. There was a lot of talent taken off the board, namely out of the defensive backs, but there are still some good players available. We talked about Aneth Peebles, Miles Frazier. Maybe they could potentially get another guard who can just play guard itself. Some more insurance along the offensive line. Bilal Cohn, Corey Black, Kobe Bryant as well. There's still some options left on the board as well. There's Dorian Strong for Virginia Tech, Zy Alexander from LSU, the 2 Ohio State defensive backs, Jordan Hancock and Denzel Burke. Kobe Bryant I mentioned as well. So there are still potential landing spots. And Eric, Shedeur Sanders is still available in the 4th round.
No, not Miami, not here. This organization does not have the infrastructure to survive that. I think we know that. I don't trust the Dolphins to be able to handle that.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe we could see another trade from Miami. Maybe a potential Jalen Ramsey trade. Maybe
At
a
this point,
Tyreek Hill trade too. Who knows?
Please.
Please, let's just get this over and done with. All right, folks, stick with us here on Scouting the Fins, part of the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast feed. As always, y'all, go Fins.